Welcome to another episode of the EsportsNext Podcast. It is my pleasure to be joined alongside my co-host Megan Van Petten, the founder of the Esports Trade Association. Of course, I am your host, John Davidson, and we are joined today by a trailblazer. She is the first female varsity esports coach in the state of Texas. She's the director of esports and head coach at St. Mary's University, hailing from San Antonio. Kaitlin Teniente, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here today.
Absolutely. We're excited to learn more about your career and what you're doing down there in San Antonio. First, I want to thank you for joining us at the conference that is happening this weekend and early next week. Tell us a little bit about the panel that you're going to be speaking on and sharing to our audience.
Curriculum and esports. I think it's truthfully the reason why a lot of us are in higher education, why we work so hard in scholastic esports. It's that application of esports across many different mediums. It's not just, playing games for the sake of playing games or for the sake of competing. I mean, there's a lot of supporting efforts that go on around that. So that's the gist.
That's awesome. One thing that I love about esports, first of all, we do not apologize for competing just to compete because let's be honest, we do that with traditional sports as well, right? And we get together and we celebrate and love football, basketball, baseball, etc. And we should, I think, the same with our digital sports as well. But one thing that I just absolutely love, and a lot of administrators and teachers may not realize, and what you're speaking to at our conference is how to utilize esports in curriculum. And it's just so cool that just about every kid is a gamer now. And there are so many aspects of students' greatest passion that can be utilized in the classroom to make the principles you're teaching more relevant, engage kids in a greater degree. And why don't you share just a little bit? You can tease us so you don't give all your secrets from the panel, but just share a little bit about your experience utilizing esports beyond the competition stage.
Yeah, so two things come to mind, something that I've spent a lot of time, effort, energy in developing. One is our summer camps for middle school and high school students. And then beyond that is our student staff program here at St. Mary's. We've built over 20 different student jobs on campus. And one of the benefits, other than getting paid, of course, they're all paid, and that's a huge benefit. But one
Yeah.
of the benefits for the students, especially the students who are trained to produce our live streams and broadcasts, is that the training that they do for an esports broadcast is the same training they're going to get for any of our athletics broadcasts. So they're cross-trained. And so that also means they can double dip when it comes to shifts. They can work esports
Yeah.
on Wednesday and a men's basketball game on Friday. So it's been, we didn't do it overnight. It's been a couple years in the making and, developing our training materials, developing those opportunities for students to actually get hands-on experience. And this opportunity is going to be developed into an internship class credit in the next coming years. So
Oh, wow.
again, didn't
That's
happen
cool.
overnight. We had a lot of creative ways to get things done, and we've had to partner with people all across campus to bring this to life. So
Mm.
I think that's one of my favorite things um, about our esports program is that it's not just one application. I mean, we get students from all over campus.
Yeah, that's really
I
cool.
like
One
to,
thing that I've loved seeing over the years is, years ago we're having conversations of like, you are the first school to implement this,
yeah.
or we've just got a gaming club and we're working on opening people's eyes to have a varsity team. Um, it's really cool that some of those barriers are being broken down and people are starting to understand this is a real thing. And I'm sure people like yourself, um, people are looking at you from other schools and saying, hey, this is how it can be done. For schools who have not yet implemented an esports program, what is some advice that you would give to get started effectively, and then how to grow it from there?
Good
So,
question.
yeah, excellent question. And it takes me back to this moment that I had with our executive athletics director very, very early on in my tenure here at St. Mary's. This is before we even started our first season. He told me, let's get good at two things first. Let's get good. Let's get really good at two things before we get good at three things, before we get good at four things.
Mm,
And that's something myself and my assistant coaches have held pretty close to our hearts, because as much as we wanted to do it all our very first year and, you know, be everything that we wanted to be, we couldn't do that without having a solid foundation and building, again, those two good things, two things that we're really good at. And those became the cornerstone of our program. And those two things that we started on first were
mhm,
building team culture and building a good work environment. Um, Everything else came second, at least that first year. So once we had a really good team culture and a really good work culture, then it became a lot easier to have tough conversations. It became a lot easier to get through some of the nitty-gritty. It became a lot easier to establish protocols, processes. How are we going to do things? Because we understood the why we were going to do things. Every program is going to be different though, so my advice is figure out what's most important and get good at two things first. And then the following year, get good at a third thing, a fourth thing, a fifth thing, so on and so forth. So that even when challenges arise, because they will, you have a really strong foundation. You have student workers and assistant coaches and whomever's working for you, they feel, you know, safe, secure, and valued in your program. Because if they feel safe, secure, and valued, then they're going to be there through all of those challenging times. They're going to be there through those roadblocks and see it through. Um, so that would be my advice. Um, I don't want to say it's a one size fits all, but
yeah,
use it as you see fit.
that's great perspective because I can see how that can be applied, developing the culture, then whatever your unique challenges, buy-in, lack of buy-in, whatever, big school, small school, a great culture is relevant to all of those things. I'd like to pass off some questions over to my co-host here because Megan is also another trailblazing woman in sports and esports, as are you. And so I always love being surrounded with women who are breaking down boundaries and really setting the tone and taking the stage. So Megan, I would pass it over to you. Um, I'd love to just hear you guys kind of relate a little bit about your trailblazing experiences, the similarities and the differences there.
Yeah, I think it's a great time to be a woman. It's not that it's ever a bad time, but I've been very comfortable in the space. I don't know how you're feeling. I'm curious how you're doing. I'm curious about how many women are in your program. Do you think there's more women in your program because you're a woman, and you're leading by example? I love being a trailblazer, and it's always fun working alongside you too, John.
Yeah, so for our program, year to year, we are about 40 to 45% of the people in our program identify as women or non-binary. Um, I think part of that is due to this idea of embracing uncomfortable conversations. And again, that's something that we established very early on,
Mhm.
because we built such a safe culture for our athletes, such a safe work culture for our anyone who is working for us, that it made it easier to have really tough, really uncomfortable conversations, whether that be about diversity in
Yeah.
esports, equity in esports, inclusion in esports. Um, so I don't necessarily think it's one thing without the other. Being intentional about our representation, I think also helped.
Yeah.
And not just highlighting women in our program who are women for the sake of being women, but highlighting who they are behind esports. You know, are they somebody who works on our social media, our broadcasts? Are they an athlete? What do they do outside of esports? You know, are they in clubs? Are they in leadership? What do they study? So painting a maybe not painting a picture, but illuminating the students for who they are as students, you know, what they do in their extracurricular, and not just the esports part. So being intentional about representation, and embracing tough conversations. That's something that's always been welcomed in our esports program, is this idea that as long as you're coming with positive intent, feedback is welcome. And a lot of that feedback can start some of those uncomfortable conversations. Um, so yeah, it's not just one thing. I think it's a mixture of things. And then, of course, having really amazing assistant coaches who are super encouraging, really great mentors. I think that has also helped folks all across campus, who otherwise might shy away from esports, to take that leap of faith and try out or join or apply for a job. So it's a little bit of everything. It wasn't just me. Again, it goes back to that building a good culture so that people can build things out as they see fit, you know, in their image, in their vision.
That's awesome. You know, one of the greatest compliments we had with last year's EsportsNext conference, a woman from another great university who we interviewed shared, she said, you know what? It was a Scholastic Esports panel last year. And she said, that was the first panel I've ever been on that was all women, that wasn't titled Women in Gaming. And so I love when you talk about being purposeful, because sometimes you're not purposeful and you wind up not representing people in the ways that we should. But it's more than just saying, hey, you're a woman in gaming. Will you speak on with women on the topic women in gaming? And I've heard many of my female friends say, John, just put me on the stage. I'm an expert in other things beyond just being a woman, if you believe it or not. And you know, to follow that, I think whenever there's a trailblazer, a lot of times there's an inspiration who that person
True.
followed. I'm curious who in your life, whether they were involved in esports or just an inspiration in being a strong and trailblazing woman, tell us who that person or a couple of those people were.
Yeah, of course. So very early on when I was in college and we had an esports club on campus, this is way back when NACE Starleague was known as Collegiate Starleague. They had a
I
community
remember. Yeah.
manager,
Mhm.
Tanya, who was just an absolute joy to work with, an absolute joy in really all aspects. And I think seeing her be so active in the community all those years ago really influenced me into staying in esports, as long as I have. And so along the way, I've met people like that who just do an exceptional job, whether it's community building or, you know, exceptional job with social media, marketing, branding, telling stories. So it's been many people along the way, but I think of her because she was definitely the first in my
Mm.
eyes.
Mhm. That's awesome. Megan, I'm curious of you. You might have a couple of years on Kaitlin, no more than that. But
You're so kind.
you've trailblazed in a couple industries at least. I'm curious the same question for you.
You know, I'll tell you, I I respected women. You know, when I was in college, I'm trying to think, in 1995, I was in my undergrad program,
Just 10 years old.
and there was this woman doctor, and her name is Ellen McMahon, and she was so kind. And I remember just signing up for all the classes I could because she looked really cool and she was nice. And I did everything she said. I took as many classes as I could. And lo and behold, I'm on a walk 2 weeks ago. And there she is.
No way.
I'm, I'm not kidding. There she is, standing in front of the Peninsula Hotel, in from out of town, of all places. And I'm like, Dr. McMahon. And she's like, Megan Van Patten.
You left an impression. I'm surprised. Or not.
And she's like, I follow you on social media. And I'm like, oh my God. But I did what she said. I really did. I followed her advice, and she knows I did. And she's like, so how you doing here in Chicago? And I'm like, I could use some help. She said, I can make a few phone calls. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, amazing, of all things. And I think that when you go through this journey we call life, and you make the impression, whether it's a man or a woman or whatever, you just be the best person you can be. And you're just going to have this circle of amazing things constantly happening. I end up taking a photo of her family for them because they're going to a baseball game. It was Father's Day. I bumped into her. And then she sent me an up. She's like, so what do you need over there in Chicago? Because she doesn't even live here anymore. But I think professors are just kind, coaches. These are people that aren't there, but to really make a difference, help students. And I did all sorts of things that Dr. McMahon told me to do. And I will not be surprised if she shows up at one of our conferences, but it was divine intervention to bump into her the other day. So
That's awesome.
that's what I did. I sought out mentors, and I listened.
Well, that's cool because I can picture how, Dr. McMahon's presence in your life, Kaitlin, you, I'm sure, have a similar presence in a lot of your students' life. I'm curious, what are some of the common pieces of advice that you give students who are coming up through your esports program?
Number one is probably write down everything you do for your resume. We have a lot of students who, at the end of the day, esports is not the industry they want to pursue. And so when it comes to things they take away from esports, it's a lot of soft skills. It's showing up early, showing up on time, showing up game day ready. Game day ready looks different for any number of companies or any number of situations in life. Embracing difficult conversations, not being afraid to have a tough conversation with somebody that you care about. And of course, document everything that you do, because you never know when you're going to need to update your resume. You never know when, this thing that you did X number of years ago is going to come back to be beneficial to you. And so it's things like that. Definitely embracing the things that are uncomfortable, because college is a really good place to do that. It's a learning environment. You're going to meet so many different, interesting, unique people, and a lot of them have different communication styles. So not shying away from that has been beneficial to a lot of my students. And, even years later now, because I've had 4 cohorts of students graduate now, they'll come back a few years later and tell me how this experience has shaped how they work in the corporate world, or how they work with difficult people, or how they've accomplished new things that maybe they were scared to do. Um, so not what you might expect, but again, it comes back to this idea of embrace those things that are uncomfortable, and don't feel like you have to shy away from a tough conversation, because more often than not, it's going
Hmm.
to be beneficial for all parties.
Yeah, and if you can accept criticism and kind of see the forest through the trees on that and
Mhm.
be self-reflective, you're going to get far. And I think the culture you referred to earlier is a big part of that, right? Because if you have a great culture, then that critique is also going to be much more kind or on target with how the person needs to hear it. I'll give a piece of advice I heard before I went to
Okay.
college, just because I feel left out. No, and then we'll get back to your students. But I went back to college late after pursuing my skateboarding dreams all over the country. And I was working at a tax firm in Washington, D.C., and there was a gentleman there who he was in charge with the training at the tax firm. So he built all these, curriculums and programs, and, you would be scheduled to, enhance your skills in XYZ. His name is Tim Tobin. And so he was one of the people who convinced me to go back to college or helped advise me on that decision because I was making enough money to live on for the first time in my life. And I was like, moved back to California from Washington, D.C. I'm going to be poor again, like working part-time at Starbucks or whatever while I go to
That's
school.
such a great story because you're leaving out that you were a professional athlete. He's very humble.
Well,
I've got to
thank you.
be, I got to have his back.
Appreciate
So,
it. Yeah.
especially in this industry with gamers that like pull out, become professionals, then go back. Nothing.
Yeah. And it was awesome chasing those dreams, skateboarding all over the country. And then you get comfortable. And I heard one time on Shark Tank, I think I heard Mark Cuban say something like it's easy to eat ramen if you're already eating ramen. Like when you're poor, it's easy to like to stay in that. But when you get above that, when you start eating the burgers and some good food, it's really hard to go back to ramen. And so I was going back to ramen and it was tough. But the advice that Tim shared with me that I thought was so impactful, he said, John, because I knew I wanted to study marketing, but that's all I knew. He said, don't worry at all about what you're going to do after school. And I was also like 25, I wasn't 18. Like I had some life experience, but he said, John, the people you're going to meet so many new people. Your interests will change as you learn new things. There are going to be opportunities that arise that today you have no idea about. Just walk down the path and be open to seeing where it takes you. Do not limit yourself to, I am going to do specifically this or have to do that. And I never would have guessed that after college, 1 month after college, I moved to Dallas, Texas, after having never lived in Dallas to work in the design industry of all things. And so I would just encourage young people, just get started, go down the path and be open to what comes into your world through the journey of learning and experiencing new ideas and meeting new people, etc. To go back to you and to stop me from talking anymore here, um, what I have a question. You were referring to your students earlier, and you were talking about the opportunities for jobs and placing them. Can you talk a little bit about what are the job opportunities, and do they go beyond the esports industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So to start off, in our program, we've got a number of job opportunities for students. We have federal work study for students who qualify for federal work study through their financial aid. We have roles for students who are interested in broadcasting, whether that's shoutcasting and commentating, being a game observer, um, being a producer or a technical director. Additionally, we've built out roles for students who are interested in social media or specifically marketing or specifically branding. we've built out, just this summer, we built out a brand new role for a student who is focusing on communication and technical writing. So there's quite a bit of flexibility. And even though the subject matter is esports, all of those roles have at least one thing that's translatable. I mean, for our student who's focusing on technical writing and internal documentation and communication, I mean, yes, it's esports, but at every large company, there is someone doing some combination of those jobs.
Yeah.
Or if it's on our broadcast, technical directing. I mean, if you can technical direct an esports broadcast, you can do so much with that. And over the past 3 years, the students who have worked on our esports broadcast as a technical director have gone on to work on our commencement live streams. So again, even though we're not watching esports, I mean, a lot of those skills translate in a very important way, because we can't really we can't afford a mess up on commencement.
Right.
So speaking towards the skills that they learn, it's not just the technical component, it's also learning how to execute a run of show, learning how to take what you've learned here and adapt it to a brand new staff every single year. And similar with the students who have come to work for us for social media or marketing and branding. 2 years ago, we had a student who was with us for a marketing internship, and his big project was to build a brand book for our esports team, because we have
Cool.
special marks that are only used for our team. And so that entire semester, that is what he worked on. And because of that specialized experience he got building out and maintaining a brand book, he was able to get a similar role at a marketing agency for their branding. So esports is the medium, but it can be applied to a lot of different things. It really just depends on what you take from it and how well you can leverage that experience. And one thing I'll say is that there's a lot of people on campus who want to work. And sometimes there is for people in my position, whether it's a people manager or director of a program, sometimes there's a struggle with how can I find the funding for this? And part of that is you got to get creative. And that's what we did. We got really creative on how we're going to pay all these people. I mean, we figured out how to get, how many more people do we need for work study? How many work study spots go unfilled each year? We figured out, okay, for students who don't qualify for work study, how can we pay them? Well, we've got this account over here that's used for athletics game days. Well, sports has game days. Let's use the same budget. There's been students who have worked on things that are not related to game day operations. So it's like, all right, let's figure out something creative to pay them as well. And so again, it's not something that we did overnight. We had to get really creative and truly leave no stone unturned. We had to make a lot of friends across campus. And, when we came up with these proposals to have these different jobs and to pay them in 10 different ways, we had to not be afraid because we got a lot of questions. Because it's kind of crazy, and really there was no other department on campus doing something like this. So we really had to stand tall and invest in it, because what we recognize in our students is that they're investing in these skills already, right? They're already becoming subject matter experts. How much better can our program be if we invest in them and pay them to work in our program? So being really creative, finding creative solutions to pay people, and then just believing in what we're doing because the students believe in it have been key to being able to accomplish like 20 student worker jobs each year, and year to year, we're retaining 90% of those students. The students that don't come
Wow.
back year to year is because they're graduating or they find a better role that's better paid, which is the goal. If the experience
Yeah.
you get here allows you to get a better job on campus or off campus, do it.
That's awesome.
It is.
Yeah, because there's a certain metric that universities are graded on of getting a job after school, right? And so it sounds like you guys do very well in that.
We're getting better every year.
Yeah,
We're getting better
I agree.
every year.
Well, I love how purposeful, that's what I'm hearing from you, is how purposeful you are in ensuring that these students have not just opportunities, but paid opportunities, which is really commendable. And what I love is the recognition that all these students are gamers. And so you are simply teaching the same lessons or giving very similar experience that you would historically, traditionally, but you're doing it in esports. And I love that brand book example. That's perfect because anybody who's working at an agency, there's a lot of brand books. Anyone who's worked at a brand, I've seen a ton of those. And it's funny. I remember my capstone project at my college, and I got a great education, but my capstone project was a local mechanic who didn't have a certificate to do oil changes, you know? And it's like, yeah, bro, you should probably get that certificate because there's no reason to come here. And to be fair, I was not super passionate about cars or mechanics, but if my capstone project had been something that I was passionate about, it was cool that it was real world, so we felt a little extra excitement and pressure of like, oh, this isn't just a test or, a book project. This is like really affecting a business. And that part was cool. But the fact that these kids have grown up gaming their whole lives, maybe they're competing on the stage as well, or they're part of the gaming club. It's like, hey, your capstone project gets to be involved with the thing that you love the most. There's nothing better than that.
Remember that one university, I don't want to like mention, but
Yeah.
because John and I, we get to a lot of universities, we tour a lot of things, and we find great things about there's just so many. This one university we were at, the arena or the esports focus was in the center, and you could almost take a lane and then see another whole department. It was like broadcasting, and then it was like production, and it was
Marketing,
just marketing. Yeah.
partnerships. Yeah.
Oh my God. It was
Yeah.
so supported. It was like, whoa, this is almost like the top of the hill, But the whole journey is such a blast. The whole journey's been so fun.
Well, there's so many opportunities in this space and beyond the
Yeah.
space.
Yes.
I love the example of you're talking about like remote surgery, which is a huge thing currently, but even more in the future,
Yeah.
right? Air traffic controllers, pilots, all sorts of, I mean, live event production is kind of obvious. It's like, let's produce an event, shoutcasting is kind of obvious. And not to look down on those at all, but there are many, many that are that parents and teachers don't think about. To shift our conversation over to Esports Next, which I cannot believe that we are less than a week
I know.
from this conference. Finally, Megan, my goodness, we've been planning this thing for a while. Tell me what you're looking forward to coming to Chicago, being on stage, and just being in the room with all these amazing people.
I mean, I think it's gonna be, the immediate thing that comes to mind is I'm so glad this is going on during the off season so that I can be fully
Yeah.
present.
Absolutely.
And I think just, seeing some old friends, some old colleagues and new. And as much as,
Yeah.
I love the panels and I love the content, I feel like a lot of the a lot of the important stuff is in the relationships that are fostered. It's,
Absolutely.
of course, in, the knowledge that we share, but definitely being surrounded with folks who are so passionate, and who care so much
Yeah.
is, I don't want to say it's rare in esports, but I feel like it is rare overall. Be
Mm.
surrounded
Well,
with so many passionate individuals. So I think for me, that's kind of the main thing I'm looking forward to.
I'm right there with you. One thing that is just commendable to our team and our community is another great compliment I heard last year. Somebody said, John, this is the best networking I've ever had in an event. And I feel so fortunate that our community is so others first focused.
Yeah.
A lot of times we'll go to an event and it's it's either people are just out to sell, 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 and you feel like you're walking through the mall or something like, no, I don't need a cell phone, or everybody's got the same job, it's all partnership people, and so
Yeah.
everybody's just like trying, and so one thing that I love about our community is the others first mentality, but the other is how many different types of roles, B2B, brands, scholastic, visitors bureaus, sports commissions. We have pro gamers, we have pro NASCAR drivers attending this year. I mean, it is what I realized, I think it was a couple of years ago, but as we've been building this community, is anything you would want to do in esports, you could accomplish anything within the community with members of the ESTA community directory, which is super cool. And Megan's got it right next to her.
I love this annual magazine.
And we got a new one that no one's seen yet that we saw today for the first time on a
Yeah.
call. So that's last year's. And this year's actually even better. Megan, I don't want to leave you out. What are you looking forward to at EsportsNext this year?
I never thought I would say this, but I love teaching this community, like Kaitlin, for example, the difference of a trade association. I mean, I really love trade associations, and to be the trade association for this industry, the educational component, like, what is it? Is so like, I get excited, Kate, when people like you come that's never been to one, because you're like, you're like, oh. And the bar does a really good job of having attorneys law students go through the bar. And and the medical association does a really good at keeping the doctors in their association. But esports, we're trying to do that in this industry because it's so big. And I can't even imagine what we're going to be in the years to come. So I love our community and seeing the same people over and over, and the new faces like Kaitlin that light up when it's like, oh, Microsoft, you mean you'll come and put a new such and such in my, or a brand, like you would sponsor for my jersey, or then you get to see this coach that did this amazing thing across the country that you normally might not have a budget to do, so then people say to me like, who should I sit with? And I'm like, there's no bad seat. And I strategically try to get a venue that we're run of the house, that we're the whole hotel. So almost everyone you meet is in the hotel. So, we really try to do a lot of things. So as far as I understand, we're the only group in the hotel as well, which is, besides, I think Michael Jordan will be there with his NASCAR team, because Michael Jordan's restaurant is there. So
last thing I would say is,
was that a short answer?
No.
So it can't be clipped. That's always like, can you keep your answers short?
Soundbite.
Soundbite.
But that was great.
Thank you.
Last thing I would say, Kaitlin, is bring the coolest shoes you have, because we have our sneaker soiree industry appreciation reception the first night. And the whole thing is just be the the best version of you, you know? So some people are gonna be rolling up in some suits. I'm not. Some people are gonna be in their esports jersey. Some are gonna be cosplaying, perhaps. Some are
Yeah,
gonna be casual with a dope pair of kicks. I'll probably be one of those dudes. So
you always are.
you know, bring the fresh footwear is what I'm saying. Cool.
Have you
Well,
been to Chicago?
Yes, I've been to Chicago a number of times, so I'm very excited for going
nice.
back, especially in the summer.
That's
Big
when,
time.
yeah.
Last question, for those who are listening and watching, who want to get in touch with you, who want to learn more about the St. Mary's University esports program and all you're doing there, how should people get a hold of you?
If they're looking to get a hold of me specifically, email is the best way. If they're just curious about our program and the things that we do, Instagram is arguably the best way to get a sneak peek as to what it's like, what it's really like to be here.
Cool. And what is that Instagram handle?
STMU Esports.
STMU Esports. Perfect. Well, Kaitlin, we just thank you for being part of our community, for participating as a speaker in the conference, and also the example you are to all the young women out there, trailblazing and showing what's possible in esports. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of the EsportsNext Podcast.
Of course, thank you so much for having me.